Hi, everyone. It's my pleasure to participate in solidarity with Scholar Strike this week. My students, I'm not teaching this week. I have recorded a lecture for one class and told the other class that we will see each other next week. So I'm trying to be in solidarity with this action. I thought that I would just offer a few words about the thing that I always want to talk about, which is the role that Black women have to play in this moment and what it means to center Black women's politics in this moment. And I think that's playing out for us in a few ways. First, I'm offering these remarks in the name of Sister Breonna Taylor, who was killed in March in Louisville by cops who busted into her house late at night with a no-knock warrant and killed her while she was sleeping in her bed. And she's part of a spate of a long line of Black women and girls who have been killed by the police. And because as a country we were so enraged by what happened to George Floyd, we were frankly very belated in taking up Sister Breonna Taylor's case. And her case happens at the nexus of two things: one, this continuing problem of state violence, and two, this problem of COVID that had us in our house and had us quarantined, and local activists on the ground were initially constrained by how they could respond. And so I think that thinking about her case and thinking about the conditions that helped to shape it becomes really important when we think about both the demands that we're making of the country and then what we can then do in this moment to try to make conditions better for ourselves. And so first, I just want to argue that we really should begin to trust Black women. That is a framework and a slogan that has come to us through the reproductive justice movement, and that it's a 25-year-old slogan. It was pioneered in 1994 by the sisters at Sister Song Reproductive Justice Collective, and by Sister Loretta Ross, who is a part of that collective. And that framework has been about our right to have kids, to not have kids, and to have the kids that we have grow up in safe and healthy environments. And that, really has to be kind of a core focus as we're thinking about this moment, and we're thinking in this COVID moment about, how do we protect Black women's maternal health? How do we protect the lives of Black children who are being forced to go back into schools that are not safe to reopen? Every time I see these kids with these masks on in schools, when we know that, being in buildings together up close every day, all day, that is a super spreader event. And when I see colleges reopening around the country, including my former university, University of Alabama, where they now have over 2,000 cases. That reminds me that we aren't listening to the truth of the reproductive justice framework and the way that it turned us to the material conditions that Black people face, and ask us to let those material conditions be the driver of how we understand our politics. So that's A, I think we should trust Black women. B, I think that we have to remember in our racial justice movements that we aren't fighting for all the people if we are not fighting for Black women. So if we are not fighting for Toyin Salau, the young sister who was killed in Florida, who was an activist and who was participating in the racial rebellions of the summer, if we're not thinking about Sister Iyana Dior, who's still recovering from being viciously attacked during a protest in Minnesota this summer, if we're not thinking about the range of trans women who were killed even just this summer and who get killed every year. But look, it's not just enough even to talk about trans women when they are violently attacked or killed, but we've also got to be thinking about whether we're continuing to sustain the commitment that the movement for Black lives made right after Michael Brown was killed, that we would elevate trans women in leadership and that we would follow their lead and listen to their concerns. So we've got to be listening to women and to sisters, to Black girls. We spent a lot of time, some of us, organizing this summer and amplifying movements to get 15-year-old teenager Grace in Michigan back home after a judge locked her up because she didn't adjust well to the pandemic and wasn't doing her homework. And I'm happy to say that because of the organizing of teen girls in the Black Lives Matter in all capacities chapter there in Detroit and on the outskirts of Detroit, that Grace was released in July, and then she was let off of probation in August. And that was a confluence of journalists at ProPublica raising concerns, journalist Jody Cohen, and then Black movements responding. And so we have been showing the best of ourselves, but we've got to continue doing that. Sister Natasia Williams was killed this this August last month by a security guard there in Indianapolis, and there's been comparatively less coverage of her case. And so we've got to stay on the case, thinking about what's happening to Black women. Part of what happens when brothers are killed and we are horrified and we are outraged is that Black women become an afterthought in our politics. And thankfully for Breonna Taylor's case, that hasn't been the case, but certainly getting it right once or twice is not enough to remedy the many, many sisters that we continually overlook. And so we've got to figure out a sustained framework of justice that will allow us to think about what's happening in Black women's lives, and recognizing too that death shouldn't be the reason that Black women get to occupy the critical center of U.S. politics at some point. And so I want to say two more things and I'll be done. One is that one of the things that we then need to be thinking about, Beverly Guy Shefdahl helped me with this, pioneering Black feminist scholar. She and I were talking about what happens, why in the middle of a pandemic so many people are in the streets, because we have COVID and all of that. And she just said, look, when we primarily focus on Black men dying in the streets, it takes away our ability to focus on other things that should also be drivers of politics. I just want to note for you that nearly 40,000 Black people have died of COVID since March. There's been a real misinformation campaign and our people have been misinformed about these numbers, but we've literally lost almost 40,000 Black lives, a comparable number of Latina lives, and a significant number of Indigenous lives. Over 190,000 people living in this country, Americans and otherwise, have died of COVID. Black women have been disproportionately affected because we're more likely to report that we have been fired from our jobs than white men, about 2 to 1 more likely to report that. We are disproportionately overrepresented in terms of people who do essential care work, particularly caretakers in nursing homes. We are reporting high rates of depression. And we are the primary caretakers of Black children in Black communities because most Black families, Black mothers are heads of household. And so the caretaking responsibilities that have, doubled, that have, grown exponentially under COVID are affecting Black women. And so one of our key things that we've got to do in this moment is we've got to let that be the driver that changes our politics. And so for me, one of the things that means is that I'm going to vote in November, and I'm going to vote for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And I will not make this a booster for their campaign because frankly, they were not initially my choice, but I'm fully on board with them. Now that's who the American people have chosen. I'm excited that we will get to have a sister potentially in the top, in the VP slot. And while I think we can have all of the reservations that people of good conscience should have about the American nation state, about the march of centrism, about the refusal of of us to be able to have a real left movement in this country. I also think that we need to trust Black women and trust that Black women voters have said that this is the way that we can get out of the clutches of the madman that's in the White House. And Black women have also said that it really matters to them to have someone who looks like them in the White House after many decades of being the most consistent voting, or here in the 21st century, being the most consistent voting Bloc in the Democratic Party. And so one of the things I want to say to us in a mode of solidarity is that we can't just trust Black women when they're doing the things we want. We've also got to listen when sometimes the truths are harder for us to stomach. So I think we should vote Biden-Harris, and I think we should do that not on principle that they support all of our principles, but because they're the most viable option we have, and because more than 40,000 Black people have died of COVID, and a significant swath of Black women have been badly affected by what COVID has done to our communities. And so again, I want us to just continue to think, as we think about radical politics, what it means to keep Black women at the center of our politics, to keep Black women's radical ideas and vision for a world in which everyone gets to eat, in which kids are safe, in which everyone goes to good schools, in which our vote is protected, in which we live in safe neighborhoods. That is Black women's political vision. It is what we fight for. We are not denizens of carcerality, but we are pragmatists in moments where we need to be. And because of that, we have kept the nation's lights on, and any semblance of democracy that still exists is by and large because of Black women's committed pragmatism. So I urge you in this moment to trust Black women, and also keep fighting the power.